It is lovely to see you all here today. Thank you for coming. I am Colin, Irene's son. Most of you will know me. For the members of Bearsden Golf Club who are here today, you may only know me as Santa Claus. If she's here, I thought I'd take this opportunity to apologise to the lady who found me changing into the Santa Claus outfit in the golf club bathroom at Christmas. My mum found that particularly amusing. I'd also like to say a special hello and thank you to Catherine, wherever you are. Where's Catherine? Thank you for coming last week also, Catherine. My mum would have appreciated your commitment. I'm glad you also came on the correct week. Thank you very much. So hopefully you all had a card on your seat on arrival today. This photo is a favourite of mine. Shows my mum in her 70s actress look-alike phase. Some of you will know the story of her being stopped at Euston Station by a man saying, "It's you, isn't it?" My mum said, yes, it is me. He then asked for an autograph without my mum really knowing who she'd been mistaken for, but he seemed to go away delighted as my mum had written "Best wishes from Glenda Jackson." So I'm going to say a few words about my mum and her life in general, and then Chris, I'm just going to move this here. Chris, her long-time friend and musical collaborator who's here, will also say a few words and recount her musical life. We'll also get a chance to hear her singing voice again, see her sending herself up, playing the piano and being generally a wee bit naughty, which is how we will all remember and indeed how she'd love to be remembered. Entertaining to the last. So please feel welcome to laugh and cry and clap if you're so inclined. Today is a celebration of the life of my mum, Irene McLennan. She was a merry and not a maudlin person. She would understand our sadness, but she would want us to remember her with humour and with stories that make us smile. It was daunting, having to put together some form of abbreviated history, as my mum experienced so much and was involved in so many things all the way through her life. It's an awesome responsibility. I came to realise I simply couldn't cover everything. It's also possible that there are many stories I know nothing about, as she will have considered them not for my tender ears. In any case, we'd be here for days, not for the last time. I can hear my mum's voice in my ear saying, "Get on with it," so that's what I'll do my best. As most of you will know, my mum had always specifically stated that she was to have no funeral. She originally made the bequest to Glasgow University back in 1985, that her body be donated to medical science, and she kept to that pledge. She never wavered from her conviction that this was her desire, and she would have been delighted to know that her bequest was accepted. She was selfless in death as much as she was in life. And what a life that she had. She was born on the 17th of October, 1932, at 8:50 a.m, just before the school bell rang, I noted, at her home, 3 Grantley Gardens in Shawlands, Glasgow, the second child of Lily and David Kennedy and the younger sister of Muriel. She was named Irene, as her mother wanted a name that couldn't be shortened or made into a nickname. She spent her early years happily living in Shawlands with her fairly strict mother, housewife, and her genial, good-natured father who was a librarian. By her own account, she was a bit of a tomboy, and she ran the streets of the south side with a variety of local kids. She was encouraged off the street, however, to take piano lessons, and found she had a talent for it, although not quite the application, or the discipline that her sister Muriel had. They would play duets together, and Muriel would tell her wee sister that she too could be as good as her if she would only practice. And once she did start practicing, this would be to her and indeed all our advantages as her life went on. She lived through the Second World War. I asked her for stories about that over time. She recalled bombings, the flattening of a block just round the corner from her. They went to the bomb shelter after the first time the alarm sounded, found it cold, very dark, very dull, and so thereafter they just didn't bother. She also recounted being evacuated to the countryside at one point, but returning home after just a week, as it was, as she put it, terribly boring. So perhaps a general dislike of caves and countryside contributed to her being a city dweller ever after. Certainly, she enjoyed being in amongst it with plenty of things to satisfy her attention. She finished high school at Shawlands Academy just at the end of the 1940s, having found her areas of excellence were musically inclined, and so she set off on a course of musical learning and ultimately then of musical teaching. In the early 50s, liberated of the need to stay at home, she decided to go on the first of many adventures. As she recalled it, she was walking down a Glasgow street when she saw an advertisement in a shop window for boat trips to Canada. On a whim, she decided to buy 4 berths and then managed to convince 3 friends to go with her. Now, the next thing, she was teaching in Windsor, Ontario, and she spent several happy years there learning her trade. Whilst there, she happened to teach a young Paul Anka, who went on to be a recording star of the 1950s. My mum loved to recount him as one of her most famous pupils, although unfortunately she never received any royalties for My Way, which she went on to write in the 60s. Shame about that. So through the 50s and 60s, she taught in a variety of schools, mainly around Glasgow, continued to enjoy the single life, so I believe. She travelled abroad again to work, this time to Singapore, where she had an absolute blast, did lots of sightseeing as well as occasional work. She loved experiencing new cultures, although she didn't always get things right. She recalled one trip up the Malay Peninsula, where she found herself in various small villages. I might start laughing at this because everybody's laughing. When she asked where the loo was, she was directed up to the end of a corridor. There, she found a room, inside which was a very tall pot, about 3 feet high. With only wee small legs, she struggled up onto it and thought no more of it. Now, many villages and bathroom trips later, she learned that she had in fact been visiting the laundry room by accident, and the tall pots she was scaling with great difficulty were in fact washing tubs. Fortunately, she was never caught in the act. Now, her life was to change in 1967 when she took a car ride with a friend into Glasgow city centre one evening. As they approached the traffic light, it suddenly turned green to red, and my mum, the passenger, took a look around her, taking in the delights of Suckyhall Street at that time. What caught her eye was a well-known dance hall she'd never attended. We think it was the Locarno. And so she asked her friend to park up as she fancied checking it out. It was on that night that she met my dad, George McLennan, a local Partick boy, at the dancing. Now, nobody likes a red light, but I am rather grateful for that one. It was clear the relationship was serious. My mum was introduced to the large and extended McLennan family at their home in Medwin Street. My Aunt Margaret recalls that my mum sang Besame Mucho on that occasion and was thought to be quite the most glamorous and urbane creature seen in the back streets of White Inch for quite some time. So my mum and dad courted for a time before their engagement, then marriage on April the 14th, 1969 at Glasgow Registry Office. They set up home at 63 Great George Street in the West End of Glasgow, and this was my mum's home for the remainder of her life. She absolutely loved living in the West End and was delighted to bring a son home there. I was born on September 16, 1971 at the Queen Mother's Hospital and would prove to be the only addition to the family. My mum always said she went for quality over quantity. Sorry about that. So my mum was a wonderful mother to me. Even as a child, she was a friend as well as a parent. She was enthusiastic and supportive, and as you can probably imagine, a lot of fun. She would admit with a laugh that she was not the greatest of cooks. So she looked for inspiration for healthy food in a parenting magazine when I was a toddler. It recommended raw eggs and Weetabix as a wonderful start to the day. She said I spat out the rapidly cementing concoction, and indeed it took until I was in my mid-20s before I ever ate eggs again. For one of my childhood birthday parties, she baked a cake for me and all of my friends. She laughingly spoke about how none of us would eat it, and then how a few days later she took it to the park and even the pigeons walked past it. So while looking after me, taking time out from teaching, my mum developed a network of local friends and neighbours, especially the Coulter family, who she got to know after they moved in across the road in 1974. I rubbed out 73. Thanks for that, Stuart, this morning. They also had a young family. In particular, she became very good friends with Frankie, a friendship which endured lifelong and was exceptionally important to my mum. Frankie was a constant source of support and encouragement in times good and bad. She made a point of getting to know all her neighbours over the years, and indeed there are neighbours here today whom she regarded as good friends, and for whose support and friendship to my mum, I'd like to say a big thank you while I have the chance. She also joined Buchanan Bridge Club with my dad and was a regular attendee right up until recent years. She made great friends there, including Anita, who's here, Charlotte and Nan. Together they started a yearly trip to London to watch musicals. A favourite story she told from this time was of a game they developed on the way down in the train. Now, this game involved seeing how many items each lady could place and then hold under their bosom. My mum took great delight in telling people how she won, as she managed 3 pens, 2 packs of cards, and a packet of fags. Now, by the time I reached school age and could be dispatched to Hillhead Primary, my mum applied for and got the job as a music teacher at Hillhead High School, just around the corner. This proved to be a match made in heaven, as not only was she able to walk to work, but she had a ready supply of West End kids who were ripe for some musical education and honing of talent, many of whom didn't even know they had it yet. She fairly quickly became principal music teacher and set about helping a variety of talented individuals help achieve their musical goals, some in a professional capacity. She was always delighted and very proud to see ex-pupils succeed, and in particular in the arts. She was renowned as an enthusiastic and inspirational music teacher whose influence on pupils lasted well after their school years. Certainly whenever I met someone from school, they would have asked me how I was doing. The second question was always, how's your mum? And that was a measure of how popular and loved she was, that this was people's primary concern. So though she took pleasure in honing the talented ones, it may be that her greatest pleasure was in bringing out talent in those that hadn't yet realised they had any. This is where the legendary school shows come in. With her fellow teacher, great friend Alistair Fulton, she helped produce numerous shows, starting with Oklahoma in 1977 and ending 14 shows later with Little Abner in 1992, soon after which she retired. For those of us who went to school during these years, the school shows are something we look back on with immense fondness and a degree of awe. My mum was able to coax folk not only to take part, but also to be able to get the absolute best out of them. She was even able to get me on stage in a pink cowboy suit with white tassels and pink lipstick. As she told me at the time, I had the perfect family trait for my cowboy role, her wee bandy legs. So while she was laid low at home in the last few months of her life, we watched a number of the shows again together. She took great delight in reliving some of those memories and remembering those pupils who made her time at Hillhead so enjoyable. Her relationship with my dad eventually came to an end. They separated just around the time of her retirement. The positive side of this is that it freed her up to do many things that she wanted to do, and she certainly had an active retirement. She joined Bearsden Golf Club and finally got to work on reducing that handicap. There, she made a multitude of new friends and enjoyed regular games where she was well known for hitting the ball, not very far, but pretty much always straight down the middle. And she was also a demon putter, I'm told. Unsurprisingly, she was a very popular figure at Bearsden and known for being encouraging of others as well as being their resident entertainer. It's worth mentioning, I think, that one of her great loves around this time was her cat, Jinky, and she could often be found out in the cul-de-sac looking for him. I do say cat, but many of you will remember her referring to Jinky by a rather rude colloquial term for felines that can also refer to a part of the female anatomy. There have been a number of people who reminded me of these stories using this colloquial expression, but pretty much all of them were far too rude for this speech. She spent quite a bit of time up north with her niece, Fiona, and all the other Blueses. She always doted on Fiona and Alistair's boys, Andrew, Gordon and Stuart, in particular after her sister Muriel died in 1994. She was even more delighted when these boys started to help produce other small people, and her spirits were lifted even in the hospice by news and pictures of all the Blues family kids. It goes without saying, my mum was famed as an accompanist, playing for musical theatre groups, students and at other events. Her talent for this was extraordinary. She was thus very fortunate to meet Chris, a local singer, around the time of her retirement, and very quickly they became friends, confidants, and musical partners in crime. They toured around various venues doing innumerable gigs, and through this they found they had an amazing musical bond. This bond translated into an enduring friendship, and Chris has been an invaluable support to my mum and myself through the years right up until her death. Now, in 2003 I travelled to Australia where I met my future wife Irene, who I then brought back to sunny Glasgow to live. She and my mum got on like a house on fire, and though my mum was sad to see us go back to Australia, she was over the moon to be able to come out there in 2006 to join us at our wedding. My mum and Erin had a fantastic relationship throughout, always engaged in a laugh or a chat, lunches, coffees and meals, and with Erin's own parents across the Atlantic, Mum had double duty on the parenting, which she enjoyed very much. 17 years of mutual reliance and affection and unquestioning support made for a very close bond indeed. She was doubly delighted when Christopher arrived in 2007, then Matthew in 2009. She could not have been a better grandmother to her boys. They adored her. They called her Gaga. An accident at first, and then encouraged, as she found it quite hilarious and actually rather accurate. She used to say, "I hope one day when they carry me off, they'll say, 'There goes Gaga.'" At toddler group, Christopher could not play with a toy unless Gaga was right beside him. So while the other parents and grandparents took advantage of the group to chat amongst themselves and enjoy a cup of coffee, my mum was at the kids' table on a 2-foot chair being fed half-chewed biscuits with a smile on her face. Gaga loved spending time with the kids, was a constant source of strength and help to myself and Erin. She took them to swimming, karate, football, collected them from school, regularly took them to lunch at the same cafe in Broomhill, right up until lockdown. And in this, she was often joined by her longtime friend and the boys' honorary grandma, Margaret Murphy, or as we know her, Maga. This increased the fun and also the number of hands ready to grab Matthew, our curious intrepid explorer, or as she put it, the resident escape artist. And I should also add that she loved our dog, Juno, and boy did Juno love her. Every time they met, there was an explosion of fur and slobbery kisses, which always drew the same comment of, "Well done, Juno, that's my face washed for today." So although she slowed down a little in recent years, she remained extremely involved in as many things as she could well into her 80s, whether that be the golf club, the bridge club, the Western Baths, or just catching up with the multitude of friends that she had made over the years. She was regularly round to our house for lunches and dinners, but retained her independence right up until the start of this year, when she became unwell and was diagnosed with lung cancer. "Oh well," she said, on being told the diagnosis, "that was about as much complaint as there was." She stoically dealt with everything that came her way thereafter, right up until her death on the 9th of August. There will only ever be one Irene McLennan, a grand dame of the West End. She was a unique individual who, although small of stature, 5'3" and a wee bit, as she always said, was huge in personality. She was an incredibly generous person in so many ways, generous with her time to others, with her commitment to projects, and with her support of people when they needed someone to rely on. So my mum, endlessly positive, regularly hilarious. She was an inspirational teacher, a poet, a singer, and an entertainer. A loyal friend, an aunt and great-aunt, a grandmother and a mother. Right now, I do feel bereft, but even then, and even through that, I can think of her and smile. I hope you all can too. Thank you. Now, I think Stephen would like to come up and say some words. So I'll just invite Stephen Hart to come up, and he's going to say some words on how he knew my mum. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. So I stumbled into the music room 37 years ago at Hillhead High School. I remember it smelled of old music and fresh air spray. And from a cupboard in the corner that Irene used to keep open, she popped her head out and she said, "Are you coming in?" And I was like, "Yeah." And that was my first introduction to Irene. And I was very lucky because she was my teacher for many years, and then for many years after that, a friend. Irene pushed me to go into the musical, The Music Man. And I really wasn't sure about it, but she told me that I could do it. And lo and behold, I got the part of Winthrop Peru, the little boy in The Music Man that had this incredible lisp. And Irene used to say that I always hit the right note on the song Gary Indiana that I used to have to sing. And for many years after that, Irene was always there. And as I was growing up, things for me at home weren't great, and my mum had a lot of issues. And one day, I always remember this, I was hanging around school because I didn't want to go home, and Irene never asked any questions. She just said to me, "You're coming home to stay with me tonight." And I said, "Sorry?" And she said, "You're going to come home and you're going to stay with me and Colin." And she forced me into Colin's room, put a bed up on the floor, and she said, she never asked any questions about what was going on at home. And it must have been 15 years later that we eventually talked about it, and I just said, that one night for me was so important, and so, you know, I think I often look back at it now and think, that's all I needed. I just needed somebody to keep an eye on me and make sure that I was okay, and Irene did that, and I feel very lucky to have had her, as I say, it's a music teacher, a friend, and yeah, just somebody that encouraged me to be who I am and do what I do. It's just down to Irene. Thank you.
Probably not at Chris' height. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Chris Mills, the Mills of Mac and Mills, that well-known act of stage, screen and working men's clubs, Masonic orders, the Western Baths, and on one particular occasion we were known for filling Partick Borough halls for 2 nights running. Irene and I loved making music together and very often sat in her living room in Great George Street, threading songs together that were suitable for us to use in a concert or whatever. As everyone knew Irene is aware, she adored her friends and treasured her family. And it may seem strange talking of celebration, as we are all still slowly learning to adjust to life without her. And grief is the cost we pay for loving and caring, and we know for sure that not having Irene around is going to leave a very big hole in all our lives. However, as we all know, life for the rest of us moves on, and there is no greater respect for someone who has passed on than to celebrate their life, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a time for quiet reflection to allow us to remember Irene with our own private thoughts, and Colin has selected some audio-visual clips and some music for this purpose. Although she is no longer a visible part of our lives, she is going to live on in our memories. The part she played in your association with her can be remembered, understood, and celebrated through her story and your own recollections spent with her. And Colin and I had quite a job selecting some of the best anecdotes and the stories that we wish to share with you today. The successes of many of our former pupils is testimony to her teaching, and one example being Max Wilson, who is now a composer and who may be here today, who was hugely inspired by her. He particularly remembers in amazement how she often played the piano without faltering whilst talking at the same time. He said it was almost as if she was just washing the dishes. The first time I had the pleasure of meeting Irene was when we were both drafted in at the last minute to provide entertainment for Killermont Bowling Club's Burn Supper in 1993. We met at 7 o'clock, and as I frantically scanned through my music to suggest some suitable Burn songs, Irene looked over my shoulder and said, "That'll do. That'll do, and that, and that." And I looked at her and she said, "Just let me have a quick look at the music." She looked at it, she threw it over her shoulder and said, "Won't be needing that." And I was a bit nervous and wasn't really able to eat my food, thinking, oh my gosh, does she really know what she's doing? I needn't have worried. I marvelled at the way she played each and every song without a single piece of music in front of her. It was as if we had been rehearsing for weeks. She just seemed to know what and when to play when she accompanied me. After the burnt supper, we repaired to the bar for a few coffees, I promise you, and had to be asked to leave at 1 in the morning so they could lock up. We chatted and chatted and chatted. And that was the beginning of an indescribable friendship which took us both on a journey of music and laughter, and both of us feeling that we were part of each other's family. She was accompanist and repetiteur for the Pantheon Club, the Apollo Players, the Orpheus Club, and the Minerva Club. When she retired from teaching in June 1993, she and I signed up to work for the charity, the Council for Music in Hospitals, to entertain the elderly, as Irene put it, in nursing homes and in hospices. We did 4 or 5 concerts a week and cried tears of joy and sadness as we helped people on their journeys whilst in care. I'd like to share with you a few peaches of our time with the charity. The first one was when we were invited to perform for the Chest, Heart and Stroke Society at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley. Now, we always liked to wear a bit of sparkle to add to our performance. On this occasion, Irene was wearing a black and gold blingy top, which was sent to her as a gift from her friend Vi in Boise, Idaho. As we liked to do, we mingled with the audience prior to the start of the concert, and a very large, cheery lady who was seated in the front row of the audience called Irene over. "Where'd you get your top, hen? It's bloomin' lovely," she asked Irene, and Irene then began to explain her sparkly gift. "Oh, is that right? All the way from America," said the cheery lady. "Anyway, when's your concert starting?" Irene looked at her watch and, realising the time, said, "Actually, we better get going," and as she turned to walk towards the piano, the woman loudly commented to her pal next to her, "She's a hell of a lot better looking for the back than for the front." Irene looked at me, hoisted up her bosom and went. Another occasion took us to Bannockburn Hospital, and Irene was driving whilst I navigated. We were caught up in a traffic jam, the driver in front of us having demolished a McDonald's meal, and we watched him throwing his brown bag out of the window. Now, with our car being stationary, Irene decided to get out of the car, walked up to the vehicle, lifted the bag from the ground, threw it back in the driver's window and said, "I think you dropped that, son." And I was a bit unsure what to expect next. However, he accepted it and we continued our journey. When we arrived at Bannockburn Hospital, we asked if the residents in the ward could be seated in a horseshoe shape, making it easier to sing directly to them and allowing us to see them and they could see us and see what was going on. So we started off with a rousing rendition of "Come in, it's nice to see ye, how's yourself, you're looking grand." And as I walked round the horseshoe, shaking hands with people, Irene was clambering away at the piano and the mood was just terrific. However, as I was making my way back to the piano as we continued performing, Irene jumped in with the second verse and sang for me, "Don't shake the hand of that wee man, 'cause I know where his hands have been, keeping time inside his pants, he's like the cat that got the cream." She was an absolute master at rhyme and at thinking on her feet. I just about stopped breathing that day. As we got to know each other better and realised that we shared the same passion for performing together, we began to get invited to entertain at golf clubs, male and female golf dinners, Masonic orders, Rotary clubs, in fact, anywhere that people would turn up to listen to us. We also both enjoyed a challenge musically and found that we could rehearse for half an hour but chat for 3, so we just met each week anyway for a good old blether. We both loved to rehearse our material meticulously so that neither of us needed to use music or words, although that did change with the passage of time for us both. Oops. We particularly enjoyed learning material that we could draw on so that we could offer a request spot in our concerts. Irene would introduce this item in our programme by saying, you know, Chris knows every song that has ever been written, except one. Does anyone have a favourite song? And of course, if someone asked for a song that neither of us knew, it was our Get Out clause. We were taken aback on one occasion, however, when Irene asked a resident in Ruckhill Nursing Home if she had a request. And the woman replied, "I gonna shut it." People often asked, how did I know what Irene was going to play, and asked Irene, how do you know what she's going to do if you haven't rehearsed a request song? It was just musical chemistry at its best, we would say. For almost 3 years running, we sang for just about every Masonic lodge in Glasgow and beyond, and Brother Masons would travel to lodges, allegedly, to make sure they enjoyed a good sing-song with Mac and Mills. As most of the dinners were attended by the same Masons, we endeavoured to draw up a fresh programme each time, and Irene would write up in her filing system in Great George Street what songs we had sung and even what we'd worn, so that nothing was repeated. Irene would also phone the secretary of each Masonic lodge in order to find out some stories about the master of the lodge, and would set about putting a poem to music, which always went down a storm. You couldn't get more unique than that, even though there would be the odd bit of paraphrasing in order to get some lines to rhyme. Her poems, when you had a birthday, were sensational, and I would particularly like to share just a small section of one poem that she first wrote to me when I got to know her. I wasn't quite sure what her taste was in perfume or whatever, whether it was alcohol or perfume, but I got a wee sample sizes of Baileys, Johnny Walker whiskey. I got her a few notepads and little bits and pieces, because I wasn't quite sure what took her fancy. And she sent me this lovely wee thank you note, which I've treasured. Well, who's a clever girl then? Who's a smashing friend? Who is generous to a fault, though slightly round the bend? With a vast selection of Christmas gifts galore, pencils and address books, shopping lists and more. The Johnny Walker whiskey, you had it on your list, and here's me some days later on my carpet pissed. Thank you, Chris, most kindly. I can hardly walk, soaked in booze, a lying here and making happy talk. As she had a terrific gift with rhyme, she extended her talents to writing pantomimes, beneficiaries being the Buchanan Bridge Club and the Bearsden Golf Club. In fact, on one occasion when she and I were invited to join 2 other vocalists from Glasgow and make our way to Achergill Towers in Wick, we were doing a Christmas presentation as part of our programme, and she wrote a very short panto, she told me the day before. And she said, it'll be fine. It's called Snow White and the One Dwarf. And it was in verse, and it was excellent. It went down an absolute treat. And she wrote a pantomime every Christmas for her grandsons, Christopher and Matthew, to take part in as part of the family festivities at Colin and Erin's. And the boys just loved it, and she loved it too. Irene's friend Olive has passed this little anecdote on to me to read. Irene's pantomimes at the golf club Christmas dinners were so popular that when the notice to sign up went up in October, the list was full immediately and a reserve list had to be made. The notice went up at the AGM, and attendances at the AGM had never been so high. And another quote, when a group of golfers was away for a break at Murray's Hall, there was a grand piano in the dining room. After dinner, Irene sat down and played the piano. We all sang along. Although our group appeared to be the only guests on the following night, we were told that Irene could play, but we were not to sing. One of the members of the Minerva Club in Glasgow worked as a production assistant with F&G Productions, the company who produced Chewing the Fat and Still Game. On a particular occasion, Liz approached Irene to ask if she would be interested in appearing in an episode of Still Game, as Irene literally looked the part for the role of a wee woman in a particular scene. Irene was so excited when she received her copy of her script to discover she even had to speak in this role. Yours truly here was invited to Great George Street to rehearse the line, "Get o'er it, Michael, she's no coming back," complete with cornflake stuck to her chin. And we tried it several ways, with a high voice, "Get o'er it, Michael, she's no coming back."
Get o'er it, Michael, she's no coming back.
So we settled on what happened. A particular love of Irene's was to break up our programme in the hospitals with a little musical quiz. And she put together a plethora of questions that were linked to music, such as a song that had a colour in it, like the Yellow Rose of Texas, or a river, and she would get the residents to sing along the River Clyde. And the last round of the quiz was normally tunes that were associated with a man's name or a woman's name. And on this occasion, as she played the last tune of the round, there was complete silence in the room, as no one seemed to be able to answer Irene's question. And she played this piece of music on the piano, and no one seemed to know the answer. And she spotted this man, a fairly elderly man, sitting in a wheelchair at the front of the room. And she looked at him and she said, do you know the tune?" And he looked quite animated, as if he wanted to answer. And two nurses from the back of the room ran down to the front, just as the man said, "David of the White Rock." And Irene was elated, and she said, "How do you know that?" And he just nodded his head. And the nurses took him by the hand and began to cry. And Irene said, "My gosh, what happened? Have I done something wrong? Have I said something?" And they said, "Robert has been here for 17 years and he suffered a really, really bad stroke, and we've never heard him speak." And we all stood and hugged and cried, because it was her urging him to try and speak that did the job. And I'd just like to share it with you, but I have one more funny song, but I would like to share these words with you as you leave today. You can shed tears that Irene is gone, or you can smile because she lived. You can close your eyes and pray she will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that she has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see her, or it can be full of the love that you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember her and only that she is gone, or you can cherish her memory and let it live on. We can cry and close our minds, be empty and turn our back, or we can do what she would want, smile, sing, love, and go on. Now, this little story happened only just before lockdown, and we decided to go up to Antonine House in Bearsden to sing for her friend Teasy's birthday. And we did a concert, complete with keyboard, which I carried in, and Irene had the music stand and the music in her handbags and our jackets, because it was quite a warm day. So we made our way into Antonine House, and we spent an hour singing for Teasy and doing songs for everyone who was there. We had a cup of tea and a piece of birthday cake with Teasy. And as we were leaving, the nurse said to Irene, "You'll need the code for the way out, 2586. Irene said, "Right, that's fine, okay." So as we were just about to leave Antonine House, Irene began to feed the code into the door entry system. She says, I think it was 2586, Chris. 2586. No. Well, maybe it was 2685. 2685. Is that 6582? So on the third attempt, this very large, burly matron appeared, picked Irene up by the arm and turned to me and said, "They're always trying to escape." Thank you. Small person's age.
Brilliant. So we're just going to have a little bit of change around here, and then there's an AV thing here. So although we've done our best here to entertain you, there is obviously only one person who can really properly entertain. So we are going to leave it to that person to do so.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Miscellany of Music. Let me introduce you to everyone on stage. We have Alan, Jenny, Chris, and myself. And there may be a very special prize at the end of the evening if anybody can guess who is the oldest one on stage. I don't really know at all what's funny about that, but I'll let it pass.
No, unfortunately, I have to sing after that. Let's have a wee show of hands, and it'll not make any difference because I can't see in the dark anyway.
How many of you out there have had cosmetic surgery? Oh, that gentleman up there, what have you had done? You got what done? Is what your wife? Anybody else? I saw the lady in front. Put her hand up. What have you had done here? You had a facelift. Have I got news for you? If I would feel I was too late for some of you, eh? Would you think that I had cosmetic surgery? Do you think I need cosmetic surgery? Not you short-sighted people, you. All I know is only been playing the piano for a fortnight. It's pretty good. Now this next song, I can't tell you how many requests I've had from people to repeat this. And normally I don't like to do a song too often because it becomes too familiar, but I have been inundated with requests. You don't believe me? And I really had to bow to pressure. So to all those people who asked me to repeat it, I'm going to do it again tonight, and I do hope that both of you enjoy it. I live alone. But a couple of years or so ago, a man came into my life. What a wonderful time we had. We wined, we dined, we danced, we did other things. But sadly, our romance came to an end. And as he disappeared into the horizon, or before he disappeared into the horizon, not long before he disappeared, he left me with this song, which the younger ones of you may not know, but those of you with the £8 tickets will. And I'd be terribly grateful if you would sing it with me, because I get emotional. Are you lonesome tonight? Do you miss me tonight? Are you sorry we drifted apart? Does your memory stray to a warm summer's day when I kissed you and called you sweet?
very short time. He took one look at Lynn's table before he disappeared into the horizon. And for the second and last time, he left me with the same song, which, due to the passage of time, he updated slightly. Are you lonesome tonight? Is your girdle too tight? Does your wardrobe belong in the ark? Is your saggy old chest hanging out of your vest? And you feel you look best in the dark. Are your stockings all leather? Your shoes wearing thin? Do you hold up your knickers with a big safety pin? Lose your teeth when you yawn. Feel your blood has gone. It's no wonder you're lost.
This is the bit I like doing.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. As we grow older, it's pretty plain. Every mirror now reflects so much less than one expects. It's pretty plain. La Gioconda has lost her charm. It's no use moaning Lisa. Venus de Milo has lost her arm, and no one wants to squeeze her. And yet, when I'm dressed to the nines, I am not finished yet. My God, I look lovely tonight. What a sight, what a glorious, resplendent delight. I'm ecstatic, my word, it's absurd that this beautiful creature is me. I look lovely tonight.
And is there just you or the two of you?
No, there are two of us. My musical partner, she sings. I play the piano and do funny songs and the odd time tap dance while I'm playing the piano.
And what's your partner called?
Chris Mills.
So it's Chris and Irene, is it?
No, it's Mac and Mills.
Mac and Mills. And are you gay, you two?
No, I'm from Glasgow. I'm really disappointed that Anne didn't ask me to tap dance. So I'm going to take my talent back to Glasgow and entertain my vast public there. And I'm sure that both of them will enjoy it. The worst experience I ever had in my life playing a piano was many years ago when I was asked to go and play for part one of the silent movie Birth of a Nation, which, as I recall, lasts just short of 2.5 hours. The plan was that I would go there first, see the film through, and get a rough idea of what I had to do. But the inevitable happened. I get there, no film. Time passes, and we reached the point of no return. And by the time the film arrived, I didn't have time to see it. With the result, this vast audience arrived, on went the film, I'm on a piano, and in the dark, and have no idea what's going to happen next. And first of all, you've got something like 10,000 cavalry staging across the stage. In the next minute, old master's sitting at a rocking chair. And then, followed by another 10,000 cavalry. Well, that went on and on and on. I work at the Odeon Cinema as an usherette, you know, and I've been tearing tickets there for several years or so, showing people to their seats and selling the ice creams, the
Odeon is a wonderland of fantasies and dreams. I get to see the films for free, but it drives me round the bend. Because I am an usherette, I never see. Did Gary Cooper get the girl or what? Did Judy Garland find her dog? Were Robert Redford and Paul Newman shot? Did Snow White turn into a frog? I wonder if the Phantom showed his face, or if they captured Orson Welles. Did Charlton Heston win the chariot race? Did they let Charles Lawton keep his bells? And now I'll never know who won Star Wars. Next week I'm going to retire.
Now, when I was abroad, that's all one word, by the way. Sorry, you were a wee bit slow there. I found myself down Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi way. Y'all understand what I'm talking about? Do y'all? With my husband and son, and we stopped to fill up, this is true, with petrol. And George was filling up. I said, I'll just go in and settle the bill. So I walked towards the garage doors, and this big fellow come lumbering out, and I said to him, I'm just going to pay. He said, y'all find the key hanging behind the door? Well, unlike you, I had to stop for a minute and think what that meant. So I realised what I was, and I started to laugh. I said, I'm from Glasgow, Scotland. I said I was going into pay, because he said, I thought y'all said you're going into pay. Anyway, that has nothing whatsoever to do with this song.
I'm a carriage with no marriage. I'm a vine without a man. I've been UNCOUPLED. Was I corroded or overloaded? Maybe I shamed him. Who would have blamed him if he thought me second class? Went in search of chrome and brass. Went to find some other fool like me. I've been UNCOUPLED. I can't seem to stop CRYING. When I pass by, people think, there she goes, the weakest link. She's been UNCOUPLED.